Welcome to the Media Roundtable Special Edition, where we dive into the secrets of audio advertising and provide our perspective on industry topics, all in service of the marketers responsible for the success of their audio program. We call them the Chief Audio Officers. I'm your host, James Ingrassia. I'm EVP of Client Service here at Oxford Road. And today we have a very special treat. This past July, we gathered 50 of the top brands together in Los Angeles to join us at our second annual Chief Audio Officer Summit. If you've been listening or maybe watching this podcast for the past few weeks, you've been treated to some of the content that we presented on stage that day. And today, we're looking back at the panel that I moderated called Audio's Role in the Marketing Mix. I was joined on stage by some of the smartest marketers in the business, including Alexis Gossard from Bayer, Ethan Shibutani from DraftKings, Steve Blackford from Norton LifeLock, and Thilert from Shopify. When I look back at our panel, I couldn't have wished for a more wide-ranging group of brands to be on stage that day. And if you really think about it, there was no overlap in any of their business categories, which spanned identity theft prevention, pharmaceutical, e-commerce, and even sports betting. It really allowed for some insightful and very different opinions about how audio has a role in their individual marketing mixes. Well, that's enough teasing. Let's hop into it.
All right, good morning. Let's get started here. My name is James Ingrassia. I am EVP of Client Service here of Oxford Road. Welcome to the Audio's Role in the Marketing Mix panel. I'm joined on stage by four incredible CAOs from four very different brand categories that should allow for some very diverse POVs. Let's start with some intros. I will let you introduce yourself, but please tell us your name, the channels you represent, and what the first CD, vinyl, 8-track, tape you bought was, since we're at an audio summit here. So, Steve, we'll start with you.
Hi, I'm Steve Blackford. I run acquisition at LifeLock, so oversee all marketing channels, including audio. Probably the first CD was Offspring, I think.
Good morning, everyone. Ethan Shibutani, work for DraftKings. I oversee our TV, audio, YouTube, and direct mail investment at the company. And the first CD that I bought was a Limp Bizkit album.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Alexis Gossard, and I lead media strategy at Bayer Consumer Health on the nutritionals and digestive brands. I oversee all channels, including e-commerce and retail media, TV, social, paid search, you name it. My first single was Ace of Base, I Saw the Sign.
I hope I don't let everybody down. My name is Thilert. I lead audio and TV for our merchant growth acquisition programs and our paid acquisition side of Shopify. My first CD that I bought with my own money was The Spin Doctors.
That's a good one.
Nice.
Very good.
Prince's still is on repeat sometimes.
Very nice. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. All right, well, let's kick things off with the very first question, which is in the name of this panel. What is audio's role in your marketing mix? To be more specific, is it used for performance, awareness, brand performance? Maybe you use different channels for different levels in your funnel. We can start with Ethan on this one.
Yeah, I think at DraftKings, audio has played, it is a performance channel, but it has played a great role in not only driving performance, our primary KPI is new customers who make a deposit on the site, but also building the brand. So I joined the company in 2015, and the company was not a well-known brand at the time. And that football season, we spent a lot of money in endorsed audio specifically. I think we built our brand on the backs of a lot of our endorser relationships. So it is a blend of performance and brand for us at DraftKings.
Excellent. Alexis.
So we are pretty new to the audio space, but for us, audio is really generally used for awareness. We are kind of categorizing it as an upper funnel tactic to drive incremental reach. However, you know, my CMO once said, sometimes you get your cake and eat it too. So we're lucky enough occasionally to kind of see it fulfill both ends of the spectrum.
Great. Steve, how about you?
Yeah, it's used for both for us. LifeLock is unique in that we are kind of the Kleenex of our industry. So brand awareness is a unique term for LifeLock. It's more brand relevance and that ongoing brand relevance. But then we use endorsements, podcasts for that true lower funnel performance. So
Great.
Throughout the funnel.
Thank you. And Tor?
Yeah, I think it's a similar story. We measure a lot in performance. I think when you think about the different brands and where they come from, the journeys, we have a lot of the same problems our merchants have, where we've sort of squeezed the bottom of the funnel. We need to work upwards. So we measure it on a sort of more direct response sort of methodology, but we know there's a halo effect, right? So there's this 1 + 1 ideally equals more than 2. We don't know if it's 3, we don't know if it's 4, but we know it's more than 2, and so we use it for both those cases.
Excellent, thank you. So audio definitely serves different, very important functions at each of your different businesses. So when looking at all your marketing efforts, whether it's TV or audio, digital, what do you consider audio being the best at? And we'll go through Steve first.
So I think we've kind of heard it last night and touched on this morning, but when you can find the right partnership with a host, a podcast host, it can truly transform your business. We partnered with a little host named Rush Limbaugh for about 10 years, and it really carried LifeLock to where it is today. I mean, in fact, it's still the most used promo code we have on the site. And we haven't advertised with them for obviously a couple of years. But I think when you can find that relationship, 60-second live reads turn into 3-minute kind of infomercials as they're just so passionate about your product, and I think no other channel really has that.
Thank you. And I think, Ethan, you had some comments here.
Yeah, I would agree with Steve. I think the endorsement is what we see work the best and what we're the most passionate about. I think was mentioned earlier today that after big moments, we all sort of go to our favorite podcast to digest situations. I'm a big sports fan, and after my teams play, the next morning I really look forward to listen to those podcasts. So we find that when we can find those hosts that have that trust from their audience and those relationships with their audience, the performance works the best in those situations. So I think that we really see endorsement be one of the best ways to drive results within audio.
Excellent, thank you. And then let's go to the opposite side of the spectrum here. How does audio get in its own way? So we'd love to make it all rosy and perfect, but we do know that there are challenges. So how does it get in its own way, and how does it give you more trouble than other other channels? Alexis, we'll start with you.
Yeah, so like I said, we're kind of new to audio. We have a very large investment in social and influencer marketing, and I kind of think about podcasting similar to that, right? They're influencers. What's unique and successful about social is that you can easily A/B test creative and quickly learn what's resonating. And I think that that's something that still is a work in progress within the audio space. It's a little more difficult to land what is it about it that is going to drive success. So then you're a little more hesitant potentially to invest.
Thank you. Tor.
I think for a channel that's evolved to different media mixes, the way people consume, it evolves so quickly there, but it feels like it sometimes lags behind in updating of measurement and some of the ways that we reach people. There's sort of like other channels that move faster in certain ecosystems like programmatic. Sometimes it feels like audio is slower to pick up the pace when it really could have been a leader in a lot of ways.
Thank you. Steve.
Yeah, I think Attribution is probably the one we're all thinking about. Even for all the digital delivery we have, it's not last click friendly. And so I think that's probably the biggest hurdle we face.
Yeah, definitely hear that a lot. Ethan, anything to share here?
Yeah, I think Carrie mentioned promo codes when she spoke up, and we still use promo codes as a primary form of measurement at DraftKings, and that's been the case since I joined 9 years ago. So obviously, not a ton has progressed from that perspective. I think we do quite a bit to triangulate, but it is difficult, and it's hard to. It feels like with audio and sometimes even with TV and some other offline channels, we are talking in relative strokes, whereas for obviously our digital channels can speak in a different language when talking about measurement. So I think it changes the conversation on what performance is and what it means in audio.
That is very true, and we're going to touch on measurement a lot this afternoon and later this morning, so stay tuned for that. Okay, as mentioned here and mentioned earlier today, there's really no other media type that can deliver that trusted, intimate connection to the person who is listening to it, probably in their earphones, right in their ears. So everyone shares that intimate connection here. You guys are all chief audio officers here for your brands, because that unique skill set is very much needed to run an audio campaign. But we all know that it takes a village to run these audio campaigns internally. So is there a team, a person, a department that you would qualify as an audio ally at your companies and this person would help you make audio successful? They're kind of there to back you up and to validate anything that you're bringing to the table. Let's start with Ethan again.
Yeah, we're lucky at DraftKings. We have a really strong analytics function, marketing analytics specifically. So we have built a really great relationship with our partners on that end. And given the fact that we have a lot of history of spend over the last 12 years that the company's existed, that we're fortunate to have, we have built, our analytics team has built sort of a model for us to look at different data inputs where we look at the average downloads per episode. One of the metrics we look at is the rate of impressions to registrations. And so we can compare podcast performance relative, podcasts and other audio channels relative to each other, to different shows, to different sort of sub-channels within audio. So we're fortunate to have a lot of great resources, and our marketing analytics team is really a partner in that. And I think it's brought in, it is not just my team and the media side that's making decisions, but sort of making really informed and confident decisions with the backing of this analytics team. So.
Great. So analytics is a huge supporter of you. Alexis, how about you?
So I would say I'm part of the in-house media team at Bayer. So for any new endeavor that we want to get into, you have to have the backing of the brand marketing leads. They're kind of your first kind of stake in the ground. But then from there, there's a million cross-functional stakeholders that need to buy in. So I'm always like, come to Bayer where there's a lot of cooks in the kitchen. So you need to have advanced analytics. You need to have finance on board. Everyone needs to get behind any new test and learn opportunity in order to kind of be able to scale it. But it really does start with the brand marketers who know their businesses, their target audiences the best.
So we have brand marketers, we have analysts. Tor, how about you?
I think you need those internal teams to make it work, right? Like you're not going to get these programs off the ground and measure them. I think what's interesting about the audio space is when you have an executive team that loves their podcasts, right? And it sort of becomes part of that culture. It used to be a book club at Shopify. I think there's almost now like a podcast club. Having those executives like hear your brand on there and get excited about it and know that they can hear we're doing a good job. They can hear that we're picking relevant podcasts. We're doing what we should be doing to make this work. That goes a long way when you have measurement bumps in the road, when you have trends, you're trying new experiments. Just having that buy-in from that team, it makes it so everyone underneath can do what they do best without so much of that swirl.
Got it. So again, executives, brand leaders, analysts. Steve, how about you?
Well, I guess I'm kind of lucky that I run everything, so me.
You're your own ally?
But, we have an internal team. We work with agencies, but also we spend a lot in linear TV, so I think that's the big elephant in the room for our executives. So audio can kind of fly under the radar, but yeah, it takes a village from the brand marketers with the creating to the analytics to read it, so.
Okay, 4 different answers. That's great. Okay, so it does take a village to grow and foster audio. Once you all come together with your various allies internally and you come up with that strategy, what are other hurdles that are meant to unlock budgets? So we know that it's not infinite. Budgets have to work and you got to move things around. With podcasting and audio arguably being less sexier than digital video and social, what are hurdles do you see to unlock those budgets? And Alexis, let's start with you.
Sure. So since audio is a test and learn platform for us, the challenge is that we bucket it as upper funnel, and it's supposed to be an awareness-led tactic, but at the end of the day, everything we do is tied to a multi-touch attribution ROI. So the first way in order to continue to grow a budget is to prove that it's successful, and then you can scale it. So if we're not seeing both the awareness uptick and also some ROI attribution or a positive ROI, then it's very difficult to get people to want to invest further. And so when you're, a publicly traded company and you have shareholders who require certain things of you, that is something that we're constantly kind of held to the fire against, and that makes it difficult to scale.
Great. Tor, how about you? Any hurdles that you see about unlocking audio budget?
Yeah, it's. I mean, there's so many different aspects of audio, and just because you figured out one doesn't mean everything's immediately replicable on the other, right? And so you almost have to start from scratch every time you move to a different medium inside of there, like radio, streaming, podcast. And I think that difficulty doesn't always make it. That message doesn't always make it all the way to that favorite C-suite answer of mine, but. So in a lot of cases, especially when you're in a growth team, like you're getting pushed to move faster and faster, I think that's the pressure sometimes is you need some pieces to be in place before you can make that next leap, and sometimes it might not always be understood.
Got it. And Steve, how about you?
Yeah, so I think, again, being in the unique position of overseeing the entire budget, I would encourage the conversation to be switched from how do I prove audio should take more credit for what I'm already doing to how does audio drive the overall growth of everything, right? Because ultimately, that's what the senior leadership wants. They don't really care if it's TV or radio or search. They want the total business to grow. And that, I think, kind of helps frame not just, I just want to take credit for, we're all fighting over the same person, but how do I go get 10 more people, 15 more people, 20 more people, which is what drives the overall business up.
Got it. Those are great. Thank you. So let's stay on the topic of digital video and social for a minute. Podcasting has come a very long way. So we're going to take a little video tour here to the grainiest video I can find on the internet. 20 years ago, 2005, this is Steve Jobs introducing podcasting.
Now, we recently announced something new for iTunes and iPod, and it's called podcasting. As you know, the podcasting phenomenon is exploding right now. And podcasting, of course, is a concatenation of iPod and broadcasting. And what is podcasting? It's been described a lot of different ways. One way has been TiVo for radio. You can download radio shows and listen to them on your computer or put them on your iPod anytime you want. So it's just like television programs on TiVo. And that's true. Another way it's been described is Wayne's World for radio, which means that anyone without much capital investment can make a podcast, put it on a server, and get a worldwide audience for their radio show. And that's true too. We see it as the hottest thing going in radio, hotter than anything else in radio.
So, come a long way. Let's, a lot of radio in there, and a tie back to Wayne's World from last night. So the Oxford Dictionary actually defines a podcast as a radio program that's stored in digital form that you can download from the internet and play on a computer or a cell phone, which is in line with what Steve said. But we're 2 decades since then, and so there's no more TiVo for radio or anything like that. So 2 decades since then, podcast has veered very much from it. In fact, just last week, I believe, Edison Research put out a study. 79% of weekly podcast listeners consumed it on a video podcast, and 72% of them actively did. So they're actually watching this podcast. Very, very interesting there. I know we have some headlines here. You can see them here. It's dominating the headlines from Forbes to our friends here at Spotify. I have 250,000 video podcasts on the Spotify platform here. Forbes is writing about it. The Mad Libs of this headline, Khloe Kardashian to launch video podcast on X. There's not even a mention of audio in there. So that begs the question for the people on this stage. It's two-parter. How do you define what a podcast is? And with the rise of video and social and X and all those things be considered podcast, how does that blur the lines when you try to get audio-specific budgets? And so we'll go down the line here, Steve.
So I think it's all about who is your audience, what content are they consuming, and how are they consuming it. That's really what matters, whether it's a podcast, a video podcast, X, YouTube, your iPhone. It's all about who's my audience and what content are they consuming is really what the important thing versus kind of what the name is called.
Got it. Ethan, how about you?
Yeah, I think tactically the way that we split them up at DraftKings is we try to get as much data as we can on where the majority of the impressions are coming from. So I myself listen to some podcasts that start as podcasts and now have video simulcasts, and I've also started listening to video podcasts that started video first and also get ripped down onto audio. So the teams are actually separate at DraftKings, and we look at where are the majority of the impressions being driven from to determine sort of who is paying for that placement. But it is a very collaborative process. And I think, as Steve said, what matters is these are shows that have audiences, and so long as the show and the audience fits and you can find your demo within that, we don't discriminate too much. They're just sort of rules of engagement.
Alexis.
I would say for us, so we are really working towards having balanced media plan approaches, so really balancing between upper and lower funnel. So to me, it matters less if it's a video podcast or an audio podcast or streaming audio or this. It's kind of what Steve said, which is like, where's your audience and how are they consuming? And then am I doing enough to reach enough of those people to make an impact for the brand? So.
Thank you. And Tor.
Yeah, we don't really distinguish. I mean, the same team manages a podcast, whether it's video first or sort of audio first. I think where the inflection comes for us is when is it media spend and when is it like a brand partnership or like an integration. I think that's where, and we work really closely with that team because sometimes the opportunity comes from our side. We spend enough media, we get close to what's really a direct tie, and sometimes there's the reverse where we're looking to work with the creator that works well and we're looking to boost and amplify. So that's kind of where we see the difference as far as what teams are in charge of it. What you call it doesn't really matter to us, just as long as we find the right audience to get in front of.
Got it. So it's all about audience. Thank you for those answers there. Okay, let's shift. Spend a few minutes here talking about the $10 billion gorilla in the room here. It's radio. It's not going anywhere. It still commands a majority of budgets and share of audio's overall budget, but it's the Wild West performance. You can't pixel it. It's very passive. People listen in their cars. They listen maybe at home. So begs the question, how do you think about traditional AM, FM radio when it comes to fitting it in your marketing mix? And does it get different treatment from other digital audio channels? Like, do you look at it over here while you have podcasts and streaming over here? Ethan.
Yeah, so we spend a lot in not only national radio, but also local radio. Local specifically, our sports betting app is legalized and regulated locally, state by state. So that has forced us to go with the local approach. And we actually have seen a lot of success in local radio. The example I'll give is we actually launched in Kentucky last year, and there's a radio program called Kentucky Sports Radio, where if you ask anyone who's from Kentucky or lives in Kentucky, the majority of people who consume sports know what that program is, and the sort of head endorser Matt Jones is a very important personality in the space, and partnering with them for our launch in Kentucky actually we think was a major contributor to our ability to win that market versus competition. So we still, much like we love podcast endorsers, local radio hosts can still be just as effective, and we're really forced to do that with our localized product launches.
Thank you. Alexis.
So we haven't historically invested a ton in terrestrial radio, but kind of a funny story I didn't mention to you guys, but it is like a constant talking point around the building, specifically with like our president and CEO. There's a lot of ex-P&G people at Bayer, and P&G does a lot of radio. And every time you run into our CEO or our CMO in the hallway, they're like, what is P&G's strategy? And Oxford Road helped me grab a lot of this information to put together for them around why they're using it, which is incremental reach. And with like the decline in linear TV, it's a really great way to kind of offset the loss for that older demo. So it's not something we've done, but we are looking at for next year. And when we're building scenarios right now for Miralax, and if we include terrestrial radio as part of our plan, we will actually have an increase in our reach from 50 to 70%. So that's kind of proof that it's not dead by any means. And to your point, like for kind of getting into these very key areas, I think it's still a very useful medium efficiently.
Yeah, I agree. Steve.
Yeah, so like I mentioned, LifeLock's been in radio for a long time. So we actually started in terrestrial back before there were a ton of podcasts. But I think it's easy for us to get caught up in the newest trend or the newest, podcast streaming. But there's a lot of people, like James said, who still listen in their car. to AM FM radio. And if that's where your audience is, then that's where you need to be. I think it is a reach play, but it is there. It's hard to measure, but again, it's about where is your audience. It's not what I listen to. It's what do they listen to.
Very true.
Just to add to that point that Steve made there on the people listening in their cars. I remember, I think 5 or 6 years ago in Boston, where we're headquartered, I read a study that almost 1 in 2 cars in the morning commute had either one of the 2 sports radio stations on. So I think that just gives you a sense of, like, in certain markets and in certain places, how much power local radio can have.
That is very true, yes. And Tor, how about you?
It's on our radars. I think for us, it's just a matter of priorities. So we're a global platform, and I think that's our bigger priority. So we're trying to expand what we know works globally. I think radio is always coming back as something to try, and I think if you think more broadly about the channels, with reach and I also run TV. I know a lot of folks here also run TV programs. That's one of the benefits of TV. We know that's a benefit. It's harder to measure. It's just sometimes it just becomes like an order of priorities for you.
Yeah. No, thank you. Radio has a place. It's just that you have to use it right and not expect it to be as clear as the other channels. But thank you for all those answers. Okay, last structured question here, and then we have a few from the audience, actually. So if you have any questions, put them in Slido. I want to touch on the use of audio to drive other media channels. So I know from some people we work with in the room, when or audio goes on, podcast goes on, their search goes up on that end. That's a great relational thing. But back in the mid-2000s, I was a central point lead at CBS on this group called CBS Riot. It was CBS Radio, CBS Interactive, CBS Outdoor, CBS TV. And we all came together to do these big campaigns across all of our local assets. And how it worked was the radio DJs would talk about the billboard they saw on their way in that drove to a website, that drove to the web to tune in on TV. You don't see that anymore. So in today's fragmented media world, have you considered combining your media strategies to play off of each other? And if not, what is stopping you? Alexis, how about you first?
Sure. I think that unfortunately, like, a lot of silos have been built within the industry, whether it's on like the agency side. I remember when I first started, there were a lot more like full service covering all media channels. And then, a lot of the big holdcos broke out. So you're an expert in print, you're an expert in social, you're an expert in search. And then it becomes more challenging to, even if you're getting on a status call once a week, to come up with these like big elaborate partnership deals. So I think that these silos kind of got built, and even internally, like being on the client side, there's, to your point, what you just said, like partnerships or stuff, like the influencer and comms team is separate from the media team. And so there's just challenges. We do run what's called an IAT, which is bringing all of our agency partners together. Unfortunately, that only happens, though, like if we're launching a product or we have a brand new creative campaign. So it's not all the time. But that is, that's the winning ticket. It's just very difficult to execute.
Got it. Steve, I think you have some opinions here.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with everything Alexis said. I think it's, we've built these silos so we can compete against each other for who's taking credit, but really it's working together to make every touch point with a customer intentional. I mean, we all think that the first time they hear about my business is through my channel, but that's really probably not the case. So how do you make those touch points intentional to help work that customer down to that purchase decision? So,
got it. Thank you. All right, we have 2 questions here from the audience. This one's for everyone, more for Ethan. So it says, as a huge sports fan and John Boy fan, do you have a budget split? Again, this is for everyone, for specific performance heavy media buying, and then do you keep another budget on the side for brand and performance media buying, because this person loves seeing your bright green microphone on the John Boy network?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think the way we think about a partnership like John Boy that is a little all-encompassing is that there are parts of their media offerings that we know will drive performance. So the main podcasts, some of their different shows, but we also, as a partner, have grown with them and want to take swings on some big ideas that they have. So we allow for, it's not a formula, but 5-10% of our overall partnership buy to let them go with big ideas, sponsorships, different things like that we might not have tested before. So I think it's a delicate balance of making sure the majority of the media plan are things that will drive results, but still allowing them some room to get creative in ways to integrate our product.
Thank you. And since this is a new question, I'll open up to the floor. If anyone else do you save money aside for big opportunities as they come, or do you have a specific performance versus brand budget?
We have room for experimental budget. So there's this, and I think that's a great thing because you don't want to, like, if you know it's working, you don't want to penalize that with something new. So we try to set aside some budget in order to test those things. It's a collaboration with other channels. We look at the priority, we look at the opportunities, but there always should be room for experimentation because as soon as you're finished with that, like the channel's going to leave you behind.
Yeah, I mean, we try to live by a 70-20-10 rule. 70 performance, 20 is probably going to work, and then 10% is experimental. Anyone else on that question? No? Okay, one last question here from the audience is how did audio originally become part of your marketing mix? Where did it all start from? I think you mentioned a little before with Rush, but is that the origin story?
Yeah, I mean, they were on radio long before I joined the company, but I think that was how we got it out was key partnerships. A lot of, you all know LifeLock, you probably all know the commercial with somebody driving around with the number on the truck. I don't want to say specifically, I might get in trouble, but right. So that just helped build. We found those partnerships, and again, it's transformational. So I think it just always maintained itself. It was so clear that Rush was a big driver of our business that nobody actually ever argued it. Because promo code, right? But it was the most used promo code we ever had. So there really was no arguing.
You're still seeing that promo code.
Still seeing.
Anyone else? How did audio get into your mix?
I'll just say quickly, I think in the sort of early days of DraftKings, audio was a little bit easier to spin up and execute than linear TV, for example. That there's not the production dollars associated with creating a spot to run on TV. So there was a lot of testing early days in terrestrial radio and podcast because all you needed was a script and a call with the endorser to kick things off. So I think that's sort of how audio proved itself at DraftKings, at least. Great,
thank you. Any comments from Alexis, Tor?
Hey, for us, audio, like the offline, I think there was an acceptance that there was a huge hole in the marketing mix, especially like trying to drive. Even though we use a lower funnel, mid funnel measurement, like we know that going up into the top helps to push things down. I think audio, TV, direct. There's a whole world of sort of offline. Sometimes that becomes its own group, right? That's kind of where we started to realize there was a big gap we needed to fill, and that was the entry point. It was almost like who got hired first to like start up the different teams.
Thank you. And then one more question. I'm picking one more because they're all coming in now. And anyone can answer, and this will be pretty rapid fire here, but how long do you give new tests before determining if they will make it into your core budgets?
It depends. If it really isn't doing well, there's no need to try again. But I think if we see opportunity or there's glimpses of, hey, it might work here, or this is kind of working, can we tweak it? Then we'll do that. I'm interested in scale. I want the $500,000 idea, the $1 million idea, not $10,000 ideas. So, we do give those bigger tests longer to kind of mature because I want to find that scalable opportunity.
Yes.
We know pretty quickly. We do most of our testing at the beginning of the football season and during the Super Bowl. So if it's not working during those periods where we know the business is the best, then we know there's likely not a fit with that audience.
As soon as we get some measurement, basically.
No, makes sense.
Yeah, there's like a stat sig, right? If you get that, then great. If you don't get it, I think one thing you always you want to be the best. You want to be skeptical of your own program, right? And so if it seems too good to be true, you need to look into that. But also if it fails miserably when you thought it should work, there is usually with some time to come back around to an idea too. Sometimes is worth doing.
That is true. All right, well, thank you, Steve, Ethan, Alexis, Tor, for joining us on stage to share their POVs on audio's role in the marketing mix.
A huge thank you goes out to our wonderful panelists once again, Alexis from Bayer, Ethan from DraftKings, Steve from Norton LifeLock, and Tor from Shopify. We at Oxford Road also want to thank all of our wonderful sponsors and partners of the CAO Summit, including Spotify, Seeker, SiriusXM, QCode, Odyssey, PMM, and so many others. Thank you for joining the Media Roundtable. This podcast is brought to you by Oxford Road, where we want you to succeed in audio and use your influence for good. As members of the marketing community, we have the power to advance voices that don't just entertain, but edify. to build bridges across differences and preserve fair-minded discussion around the most important topics of our age. If you're a marketer looking to align your brand values with extraordinary business outcomes, reach out to our agency, Oxford Road, by visiting oxfordroad.com or subscribing to our weekly newsletter, The Influencer. We'd really love to hear from you. And if you have any feedback or suggestions, don't hesitate to reach out to us using the email address info@mediaroundtable.com. And if you haven't heard about it, take a listen to Ad Infinitum, Oxford Road's audio creative focused podcast. It's hosted by the great Stu Redwine, our VP of Creative Services. You can start back at episode 1 to get a really clear understanding of what makes audio ads work and how they can work better. Each episode breaks down a real recent audio ad from a top spender across podcast, radio streaming, and even SiriusXM. Some episodes have featured guests like Amanda DeMarco from Veritonic, Dallas Taylor from 20,000 Hertz, and Richard Schotten, the author of The Choice Factory. Season 2 of Ad Infinitum is underway now, wherever you get your podcasts. Lastly, thank you to our guests, and to Haley, Kyle, Ezra, Mary Jane, Bianca, Everett, Neil, and the entire team at Podcast One. And as always, influence responsibly.